Good afternoon and aloha. All good there? Okay, welcome, beautiful people. Good to see all of you here. I know you're in for a treat, but before I pass the microphone over to this esteemed gentleman, this is my one chance to give a little bit of a plug for the partners that put together this Mo'olelo series and just provide a couple of quick updates. But my name is Thomas Daubert. I'm the Executive Director of Friends of Kauai Wildlife Refuge, and this is our monthly Princeville Mo'olelo series, brought to you by a partnership between the Friends Group and the Princeville at Hanalei Community Events Committee. That's what they are. Anyway, that's how we get this beautiful space every month. We're so appreciate it. What we do is bring the community together in conversation, in relationship, in storytelling, and information sharing. So it is so good to see each one of you here. Folks online, welcome to you as well. And we're going to be recording, so just if we could all be mindful of our background noise with the Zoom. And folks on Zoom, if you have a question, the esteemed Patty and Louise are managing the Zoom room here, and they can bring your questions into the room as well. So welcome to you as well. Quick, like I said, a quick ad for who we are as a Friends group. We are the nonprofit Friends partner that was established over 42 years ago to support the 3 national wildlife refuges that our island is blessed to have: Kilauea Point, Hanalei, and Huleia, with programs administered by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Because we are here to support our native Hawaiian seabirds and our water birds. And in particular, right now, part of what we really want to champion is a deep awareness of the critical nature of our water bird population. There are fewer than 1,000 left of each of the water birds, and Hanalei is an essential, very critical habitat for those species to survive into the future. So we're just trying to lift that awareness up, to do all that we can to support the folks that are doing that work, and to be really mindful as of the populations all across the state as well. How we do that, essentially as a Friends group, we provide funding, we provide in-kind staffing support, and like this, we do community outreach to bring our community together and bring awareness to the work that we do. We help underwrite directly the work of our amazing fish and wildlife partners, and I want to acknowledge we have some of those amazing folks, I'd say in brown, but they're not in brown today because they get to go incognito, but and I don't have my glasses on, so if I'm missing someone, yell at me. But I see Kathleen, I see Eldridge, I see Mark, and I see Krista. Let me know if I'm missing anyone. Bless you. These are the folks who do this work on a daily basis. And we'll talk a little bit about, and certainly safe space at the end of the presentation, if we want to talk a little bit more about this challenging space and time that these folks are going through and that the agency is challenged with. I'll provide a couple of updates, but again, we just send our love and our support as we always do, but now more than ever as a Friends group to you folks. Oops, I've lost my mouse. Pardon me just a moment. There we go. We go out in the community, we talk story, we educate young people. This is Patty doing some outreach with some young people in our Keiki Wildlife Program. The future of conservation depends upon young folks being engaged in our work. We very proudly underwrite the cost of the rehabilitation of the birds that are transferred from the care of the refuge into Save Our Shearwaters and bring them back to those habitats so they can live out their lives or fledge or whatever their beautiful next chapter is. As well, like I said, young people are the future of conservation. So there's a couple of programs we're really proud of. We help support the education program administered by Fish and Wildlife, and in particular, we provide free buses to bring young people out to Kilauea Point to have a life-changing experience of coming out to see the wildlife and to continue the Moli life cycle program. And we have a couple of the folks here, Deborah and Tana, excuse me, dry mouth here. Massive champions for the education program. So bless you for all the young lives that you've touched. As well, the other end of the educational spectrum is our scholarship program, which we're really proud of as well. This year, we hope to provide $30,000 in scholarships to young people studying in conservation-based careers. we're very proud of that, but it's really the generosity of our public that allows us to do this. So thank you. The applause is for you. Okay, anyway, that was my quick plug. We have so much to cover. I'm trying to talk quickly here. That's who we are. We're really proud to stand in solidarity with our refuge partners. Some updates that we just want to make sure that you're aware of. Kilauea Point continues to be closed. The work on the road is progressing nicely. However, like any construction project, there are challenges, and so it has already been bumped forward a little bit, and the current date is May 14th. So just wanted to let you know that we're making great progress, but May 14th is now the target for access back at Kilauea Point. I wanted to pause for a moment, again, just because I think there's probably some questions and concerns about what's happening in the world. I don't want to take away from Gary's talk, so we can come back to this at the end, but I just wanted to share the state of the world for fish and wildlife. We entered this fiscal year with them losing about $100,000 of operational costs. Then they came in with a hiring freeze, blocking their ability to hire new folks. On February 14th, 4 positions were fired. Then their credit cards were frozen, effectively eliminating their capacity to do any operational spending, to do everything that they need, from fuel to traps to copy paper. And then the next push for early retirements and staff buyouts began, and also a planned reduction in force, all with the goal of reducing the capacity of Fish and Wildlife. 4 positions did get restored through a court order. However, because of the challenges of those folks feeling safe, quite frankly, coming back to those positions, only 1 of those positions got refilled. So we did get our biologists back, but that left 3 positions, 3 key positions, 3 vital positions unfilled and under that same hiring freeze that we're talking about. And right now, I think already some news is starting to come around about the next wave of the impacts of early retirements and staff buyouts. It's big and it's impactful. And the next wave is we're still learning about all of that. So again, I just wanted to share a bit of information about the awareness of what we do know, because on a day-to-day or hourly basis, it seems to change. And that's kind of where we are at the moment. Really difficult, emotional, painful place to be, in solidarity with this work that is so, so vital. As a friends group, I'm proud to say that we, with the generosity of our community, we're poised to be boots on the ground, ready to go and jump in to help. Thanks to you, we immediately provided some operational support to help fill in the gaps when their credit cards were frozen, and started to work with Fish and Wildlife to understand it's a very complicated web, but trying to figure out how we, as a friends group, could privatize and underwrite some of these positions that were either lost in the future or might get lost in this next wave. And we were getting closer to having all of those questions answered. In the meantime, we started raising some funds, and I'm pleased to say the community and a couple significant supporters in particular really stepped forward, and we raised over $120,000 of funding to support this work. I tried last time I announced it. I'm not going to do it this time, but I assure you, it's a big deal. The community really, really cares about the wildlife. They really, really care about this work, and they really care about our Fish and Wildlife colleagues that are going through such a difficult time. So we are now in the process of developing a job description for the first position that we are hoping to be able to privatize and continue its essential work. And we're having conversations about the possibility of us underwriting some additional cuckoo intern positions that also might bring some more resources, staffing resources to the refuge. And again, we, like everyone, are awaiting the next wave of what's going to happen so that we know what is needed and how we can step forward and how we can help. So in a way, this sets us up for what I feel like is such a timely conversation. We are so honored to have Gary share with us the story of these beautiful spaces. Quick plug. I don't yet have a date in May. We're trying to get a speaker in May, but join us in June for the quiet forest birds. Speaking of birds that need our help, our forest birds as well. Whole nother population that desperately needs our love and our awareness. And we're going to have a great talk on June 10th. Which brings me to, again, my non-linear thought. Now more than ever, it takes the voices of our community to raise up in solidarity of this work and solidarity of what's important to us. and for our children's future, our island's future, our world's future. We really appreciate that you are here to participate in this conversation and to learn how that was done in the past so that we can perpetuate that into the future. So really honored to have Mr. Gary Smith here today. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you. I'm going to get you a different mic. You're probably wondering what motivated me to want to be a speaker here again, aside from having a big ego and liking to be the center of attention. Put it bluntly, about 3 years ago, I became embroiled in a controversial defense of Nihokū, or Crater Hill. We're going to call it Crater Hill today in many of my stories to you, but its true name is Nihokū. It means upright tooth or protruding tooth. And so in this defense, I had to look back and say, okay, what did we do here and what did we do? And I realized I forgot all this stuff already. And so, this is trying to figure out a time frame for what happened after 1990, not before 1990. And in this defense of Nihokū for the third time, we had the terrific, capable Mehana Blake in charge, and she plays heavily in the story here today. And I thought I better do this. With the passing of Janice Lyon, I realized that there's very few of us left who remember the story. And we have Mayor Yukimura here, played an instrumental role in it. And correct me if I make any mistakes, okay? I know you weren't mayor. You were not even a county councilman. You had run for mayor unsuccessfully. But he eventually became a councilwoman while this thing happened. Yeah. So anyway, this is Mōkōlea Point, Makapili Rock, and you're looking at the promontory of Nihokū down into the crater. And prior to the plantation days, when the early Hawaiians came to this spot here, by the time the plantation rolled around, none of us knew the name of Nihokū. We only knew Crater Hill. None of us knew much of the historical significance or the cultural or religious significance of this hill. And for the most part, most of the people in Kauai didn't even know what was behind the hill when they passed by on the road. Only for a few select people living in the community who were able to go there and experience this land were we able to realize how special this place was. And although we didn't know how special it was to the Hawaiian, when we walked there, you couldn't help but feeling, I'm walking in the path of Hawaiians who probably came here, who probably had some very deep religious views and use for this hill. So that's where we are during the plantation days. Nihokū, this is the Nihokū. This is the protruding tooth. And the reason why we know that to be the Nihokū is because the land patent for Charles Titcom's purchase of this particular property, the surveyor says 60 chains to the top of the promontory of Nihokū. So in just that land patent was the name Nihokū. So of course we're trying to figure out what Nihokū was, standing there talking story, and all of a sudden, like the big W in the Mad Mad World, it was right behind us. The protruding tooth. So we also knew, you see this guy over here on the Three Sisters, you could do that back in the day. Huh? before Fish and Wildlife took over. And so this is the Makapili. These are the two eyes, the narrow squinting eyes in the cliff face, from which Makapili Rock gets its name. So when the plantation closed, a huge void was left in the community. So the Episcopal Church formed what they call the Kilauea Community Outreach Program. It was to bridge the gap of plantation leadership in the workings of the community, primarily in the events that the community participated, the Christmas, Halloween, Easter egg hunt, the 4th of July festivities. And so that's what KCOP did. That was the new organizational body for the community. Bearing in mind that when the plantation was in existence, they had their own credit union, they had their own athletic association, they had Boy Scouts and all these, the church groups, and they never had a lack of leadership because the manager would say, okay, so-and-so, you're the Boy Scout leader, got any volunteers here, you know, so we had ample organizations that ran the community under the auspices of the plantation manager. So here you can see the protruding tooth even more dynamically. But this is what we were left with. But the plantation also left us with all this excess land. And the sugar plantation, Kilauea Sugar, Sea Brewer, owned probably in excess of 6,000 acres outright. So when the plantation closed, cha-ching, they thought, oh, we're going to sell us off. And so they got realtors from the mainland come down. They had, if surveyors come down, make all these maps and propose to the county that they were going to sell the entire 6,000 acres into 3-acre ag lots. And the county told them, hell no, you're not. So then they decided, okay, well, if we can't do that, we're going to portion off our land, which is already subdivided by old geographic field roads, ahupua'as, government highway. So a government highway would cut an ahupua'a in half. So you had 2 lots. Then a river would come through it. And then all of a sudden you had 4 lots. And so they sold these off in big chunks. Well, fast forward to this is like in 1971 on into the 80s. Fast forward to about 1980, 80 or so. All these people who bought the land started to default. So Brewer acquired these lands back. This particular land, Mōkōlea, most of the coastal land, the owners did not default because they thought, well, hang on, because we got coastal land, we know it's worth something. But anybody else outside of that area, they defaulted. So Brewer got their land back. So they said, what are we going to do now? Well, the county said, well, you want to play ball with us? You better make some industry, some kind of farming, do something. So they said, okay, we're going to do prawns, guavas, and taro they were doing. So they formed this Kilauea Agronomics, KAI it was called, Kilauea Agronomics International. And so once they did that, then they said, okay, well, we're going to start to subdivide out, you know, because then they had the blessing of the county because they gave jobs and everything. So they said, okay, we'll subdivide out Kalihiwai Ridge or whatever. In the meantime, these owners on this lot, prior to this is Mōkōlea Point. So prior to that time, it was used as a shipping facility for the plantation. Yeah. So you see the ship out here. This is a huge warehouse. All the bags of sugar sent down to this ship. And so all these uses over these years, and the rest of it was a dairy farm. So all of the uses over the years you'd be hard pressed to find a bird on that hill in my day. Then the US Army came in, took it over during the war. They made a nice tower. These pictures are courtesy of Dan Moriarty, who got them after they were declassified. And this is the tunnel into Nihokū. And this is one of the ventilation tunnels here. This is one of the ventilation units that ventilated the tunnel. So as you can see, Kilauea was hardly developed at the time. Yeah? So these guys came in and they made their roadways into this sea cliff plantation. At the same time that sea cliff plantation was being developed, the owner of Mōkōlea Point was named, I forgot his first name. No, it was his father's, I forgot his father's name. His father was Mr. Schmidt. And Mr. Schmidt back there, you related to him. So anyway, he turned it over to his son, Dorn Schmidt. They were looking to sell. And one of the first things that came up was a potential buyer got his real estate attorney and a realtor and everything got together, made this cockamamie plan to put 3 houses on Mōkōlea Point. 3 houses on this point here. And they were going to do it. This is in 1982 or something. They were going to do it using solar power and dig their own well. And the county told them, no, you're not. So at the same time, Sea Cliff was being developed. So when the county said, no, you're not, at least we weren't fighting the bulldozers. Or we would not be fighting the bulldozers or someone with a plan that coveted the land that was going to develop it. Another thing that was occurring while this was all happening, in 1977, the first bird of albatross laid an egg and had a successful hatchling, which of course the story was, it wasn't so successful after all. The bird ended up dying. But it was the first time in recorded history that the albatross nested in Hawaii. And for ensuing years, they came back, and this is Sea Cliff subdivision. Just when it started its inception, Sea Cliff subdivision fell into financial trouble. And this is what it looked like after it fell into financial trouble. So it kind of languished on the way. And at the same time, all the birds that came to Mōkōlea Point were killed by dogs. Yeah. And so we had a number of things going. We had people coveting the land. We had the birds coming back, the birds being killed. We had a person who was willing to sell his land. So along came this guy, Dan Moriarty. Dan was a wonderful guy. He had a great sense of humor, sometimes a little sarcastic, but he was a super motivator. Dan Moriarty comes in. He's married to Linda Pike from Kapa'a, a high school friend of my brother and our family. He starts the volunteer program, KPNHA. Here we go. KPNHA became Friends of Kauai Wildlife. That's where you come from Dan Moriarty, from this guy here. So with all these concerns, one day, I think it was at the Christmas pageant, right after the Christmas program, Dan Moriarty was he's a motivator. So he corners me and says, you know what you need to do? I said, what do I need to do? You need to take charge and get Mōkōlea Point acquired by the federal government. I said, Dan, how am I going to do that? He goes, I'll help you, but I can't lobby. I'll help you behind the scenes. Okay. So one of the first things he did, one day he calls me up, he says, "Oh, we want you to write an article for the in-flight magazine, for Kauai magazine or something." I said, "Dan, what are you gonna write?" And he goes, "Okay, come up to the house." So I go up to the house in this thunderstorm. His wife is on the computer. Linda's on the computer. And she's ghostwriting this article from me. All the time, Dan is telling me, "You gotta do this, you gotta do that, you gotta do this." So I said, "Okay, Dan, I'm going to Kilauea Neighborhood, I'm going to the Kilauea Neighborhood Association." The wonderful thing about KCOP was it was non-political. Yeah. But by that time, Kilauea needed to be more political. And the county wanted us to be more political because we'd be doing the planning department's legwork and saying, our association is against this, or we support this. Make it so easy on them, right? So we formed the KNA. Yeah. So the KNA formed by Tim King. And it actually formed because they wanted to stop in industrial zoning on the corner of Guava Road and Kuhio Highway, which of course, I'm a businessman, I need industrial zoning. I was for it. So I show up at the meeting and I said, we had a vote. Outvoted 50-2. I said, whatever the vote comes out, that's okay, because I don't want to shove anything down anybody's throat. Yeah. So if it comes that way, so be it. So that's how the KNA was formed. So it became a very political body. So one day in the early days, I went to Fern Orlick's house. It's a stone building right across Kilauea School. She was the secretary, very capable. And we had a meeting, and so I said, okay, I want to make a motion. And I was probably out of order anyway, but that's okay. So I said, I'm going to make a motion. I move that we form a Kilauea Crater Hill Preservation Committee. I will be the chairman, and I'll give 10 years of my life to do it, to acquire Mōkōlea Point. Because at that time, the developer of Seacliff Plantation was already in negotiation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, with the Nature Conservancy, to sell off it was about 115-acre parcel, not 90 acres, to sell off to the Nature Conservancy for, I think it was $250,000. That the Nature Conservancy was going to buy it, and this would take the developer off the hook. But the county balked at it and said, because they wanted to subdivide it out. And by subdividing it out, they would be ridding themselves of the coastal zone management, because that would be somebody else's problem. And their subdivision was now neatly not in the coastal zone management area. The county said, no, you can't do that. But the funny part was, the odd part was, Nature Conservancy had no business even wanting to buy that place, because their mission was endangered species. And there were no endangered species there that they could think of. The Nene had not even arrived yet. We hadn't even thought about that. So anyway, that's what was happening there. So we got together, formed a little committee, and our initial committee, I think it was myself, of course, Joanne Yukimura. She had an unsuccessful bid for the mayorship, so she had some time off for the 2-year sabbatical, right? So Joanne was available. Joanne Yoshimoto, Luella Zablan, Helen Martin, and Janice Lyon. That was my key group. And you couldn't get a better group. I realized today in life, of course, my wife was right in the back typing all my stuff. I make a whole bunch of chicken scratch letters to Inouye and everything. She'd be typing away. What's this? What's that? Get done, send it off, all by snail mail. Yeah. So we figured, well, first thing we have to do is we have to get the word out. We have to get a petition drive. And so we brainstormed this petition drive. And these ladies in this group, I can say I've been in many volunteer groups and many volunteer associations. You always have the person who goes, okay, I'll do that. And then they do nothing. But you can't do anything because they're volunteers. You can't kick them out because, you know. And so you have so many of people like that. So, oh yeah, I'll do it. But they don't do it. And you don't have any recourse. You can't boot them out because they're volunteers, right? But each one of them did their part and more. Yep. I'm gonna do good. I'll get there. This is Kilauea Lighthouse here. That's 37, that's 31 acres, 32 acres. This was the area that the developer was required to cordon off as biologically significant, and the Fish and Wildlife was ready to acquire it. The developer would have to put in all the fencing as well. So this portion here is Mōkōlea Point. It was 37 acres. Now, Mōkōlea Point is an interesting thing in that Mōkōlea Point is part of the Ahupua'a of Kahili, not Kilauea, even though it sits in the contiguous Kilauea Ahupua'a. For some reason, the ancient people cordoned off Mōkōlea Point as part of Kahili. And so it became a property unto itself. And it was owned by Charles Lunalilo. Yeah, William Charles Lunalilo. He owned that plus the rest of Kahili, which eventually was purchased by Titcomb, eventually purchased by his son-in-law, Christian Bertelman. So we're gonna send this out as part to say, this is the back of the petition drive. In the back of each petition was this map. Now, at the same time, this is a sample of the petition. See Wayne Pacheco Sr., Mercedes Busto, you know, Helen Riznick, all kinds of people from all over signed this petition. We had like thousands of signatures. And eventually we turned them into to our politicians. Now, at the same time, we figured, well, we're going to have to reach out to our politicians. So Joanne Yukimura put the bug in Senator Matsunaga's ear that he had to see Crater Hill. So one day, when they had the blessing for Kamali'i Street affordable housing project, some of the federal funds were used for that county project. Senator Matsunaga shows up over there. And Senator Matsunaga shows up, and we steal him from that. Once he finishes speech, we drag him off and take him up to Crater Hill, to the top of Crater Hill. And Senator Matsunaga, he's a 442nd veteran, fearless. He steps right to the edge of the thing and he goes, we'll just buy the whole thing. I thought to myself, oh, please, first, don't fall down. Second, if we're going to buy the whole thing, how easy is that? Mission accomplished. So this is Howard Yamaguchi, Laura Yamaguchi, Senator Matsunaga, and David Sproat. Now I got to back up a little. Around that time, the first defense of the of the Crater Hill setback line was in play. Apparently, the developer said, our engineer put our road in the wrong place. And so we don't have enough buildable space up on Crater Hill for our houses. Fortunately, Linda Akana was the KCOP president at the time. She became the intervener. We had a survey through Kilauea, and 84% of the respondents, and back then everybody knew everybody, so we had a lot of respondents. 84% said they didn't want to see any houses on top of Crater Hill. So she became the first intervener, and they successfully held the developer back. Now, of course, the developer is going to blame the poor engineer. But if the engineer had made a mistake, he would have been in court. They would have sued his butt. They just made him the scapegoat. So anyway, the line held. House has to be below the setback line, and which really limited how much space they had. But that's tough. That's life. You buy the lot. That's what it is. So anyway, yeah, the setback line is this line right here. You see this line that comes down here? That was the setback line. Okay. Can you see that? Yeah.
You couldn't build to the right.
You can't build to the Malca side of, to the ocean side of it. Everything. So then after we got our petition drive, he said, okay, we need some letters to our Congress people. So one of the ladies got this fancy leap brochure and sent it to everybody. Now, as we were doing this, we gained partners from KPNHA. And from the KPNHA, we had Barbara Stewart, Fran Powell, Mary Jane Moore. They were the head honchos, the troika that ran the place. And so they organized all their volunteers, and they had about like 75 volunteers. And so all these people came out of the woodwork. We already had the petition drive, so people started to know about that. Then the other thing was, well, how do we get the word out to the rest of Kauai? We know it's special. How do we get these people to know it's special? Because most people didn't even know what was there. So we used the seabirds as the largest seabird nesting colony in Hawaii that's accessible to the public, those kind of things. And then I went to the Lions Club, the Rotary clubs, and all that in all the districts. And I had a slideshow. Of course, Dan gave me all his bird photos and everything. And so I had my trusty dusty slide projector and went to these things. And I showed this slide presentation about the beauty of Crater Hill and what was there, the secret beauty behind it. Well, we had a lot of supporters there, and fortunately, a Rotary Club, somebody said, well, we're not a political organization, and so I don't think this is the best, blah, 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 blah. I said, wait a minute. Isn't the goal of the Rotary Club to immunize the world from polio? Oh, yes. Well, as I said, could you tell me how you're going to immunize the world from polio without getting political? Without having to go to each of these countries and convince the politicians that that's what they should do? Oh, yeah, you're right. I said, this is a mom and apple pie issue. No more bulldozers. It should be a done deal. Should be good. So anyway, that's how we got that started. At the same time, we had to get some clout for our letter writers. We needed the Sierra Club, the Audubon Society, the ILWU. And so fortunately, we got Mike Machado, who was the union agent for this area. And he took the charge and took it to the ILWU people and said, this is a great project. All my members on the North Kauai support this project. And so the ILWU said, okay, we'll support it. We'll send a letter in. Well, that letter, they had like 24,000 members. Of course, the government's going to listen to them, yeah? But at the same time, this guy here puts in appropriations for $8 million. Yeah. So in looking at what was the $8 million for, because the buy-in price was only like 1.4 million and it was jacked up to 1.6 million or whatever. So Matsunaga said $8 million, and that's because all this was to them legislative dust. $1 million is nothing. So he said, okay, 8 million. It's to buy Crater Hill Wildlife Refuge area. It was supposed to be donated, but he's going to buy it. Buy Crater Hill, Mōkōlea Point, put in the fences and the wildlife trails. Of course, needless to say, it never went anywhere. It languished there. Then we got Senator Akaka to show up, but Senator Inouye was hesitant. He didn't show up for quite some time. In fact, he didn't show up at all. Then we got Patsy Psyche involved through Linda Moriarty's connection. And Patsy Psyche did one thing for us. She kind of moved us up in the federal government acquisition list. Now, go figure, one of the biggest detractors from our project happened to be these guys here, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Yeah. They weren't convinced that this was a good project for them. Most of it was biologically insignificant. And of course, the nanny had not arrived yet. And they were resistant, but they were resistant for other reasons. And they happened to do with political reasons of funding, how their funding went through and where their priorities were and what conservation organization had a leg in on what their funding priorities would be. It wasn't us. So, but they were involved in it because they had originally been called in by the developer to buy this place. And so they were in, it was like the hokey pokey, had one foot in and the other foot out. And then they turn around and then they would shake it all about and then they wouldn't do anything but just say, oh yeah, we're involved, You want to be involved. And at the same time, they're in Washington saying something else. So anyway, then we needed a representation. Joanne, and I don't know, Dan Moriarty perhaps, got Bennett Johnson to come down from the Trust for Public Land. They were more attuned in what we were going to be doing here because it was for public wildlife with a public appeal, and that the public would be able to go visit these areas and enjoy the place rather than say, this is endangered species, everybody else be damned. So, because that's Linda over there. She's the ghost writer. And this is Joanne Yoshimoto, and this here is Janice Lyon. Yeah. And these, Joanne went to Washington for us. She went to like about 37 different congressmen and senators' offices to lobby on behalf of Crater Hill. And she did an excellent job. And that's why each person stepped up to the plate and did what they were supposed to do without having me jump on them and tell them you're not doing your job or whatever. They just did it. And this is the same for the people at KPNHA, that they all in unison, each one of them worked to get their part done. And a lot of it was just going right over my head. It was going so fast. I don't know what was happening a lot of times. They were just doing it. And so then we got this guy, Bennett Johnson from the Trust for Public Land. Now, Bennett Johnson's father was a senator from Louisiana. And I always remember him telling me this. He said, my dad used to say, we had a saying in Louisiana. It went like this. That may be tainted money, but it ain't enough. And so this is one of his lines. And I never took him up on it. And he said, anytime you come to Louisiana, we have a place in the French Quarter. I didn't tell my wife that, but you can stay over there for free. But I never did. But anyway, he was just a young guy, I don't know, maybe he was what, 28 or something. I was 10 years older than he was. And he worked tirelessly. And so the first thing he did was he went to see Dorn Schmidt. Here's Dorn Schmidt. No, that's not Dorn Schmidt. I'm going to fast forward. Wait, here we go. There he is. This is Dorn Schmidt, his wife Carla, and Mr. Schmidt, the father. Yeah. So he went to see Dorn Schmidt and he said, put an offer on your property. And just on a leap of faith, right? He convinced him that the federal government was going to kick in this money and we put in an offer for 1.6 million for your property because he had it on the market. He was selling it. So he agreed. And in agreeing, we tied him up for a year. And as the years started to dwindle down and the money wasn't coming yet, we still got the interest from Senator Akaka coming in his liaison. And then we had Luella Zablan, who then got Peters. What was the first guy's name? No, something else, Peters. But anyway, Mr. Peters, who was a longtime chief of staff of Senator Inouye, come down and see Henry Juni. No, it was Peters. But anyway, so he said, he came down and he looked at the place and he was flabbergasted. He was so flabbergasted, he missed his flight back to Honolulu. And so Luella brought him and Luella got the Akaka connection. And Luella was an interesting person because Luella is about as Hawaiian as you can get. And the Hawaiians like that, hard to find today. But she had an interesting pedigree in that she was related through marriage. She was the owner of a kuleana, of a lot in Waipake, because her great aunt was married to the chief Naiole, who claimed that land in 1850 as part of the Great Mahele. As one of the chiefs, he acquired 647-acre Waipake. And they were the last Hawaiian-owned ahupua'a in Kilauea. In the Ko'olau district. And that's where Luella came from. And so Luella, credit to her, had the connection to get these politicians to come down and then convince. And so then Akaka made an appropriations, which didn't quite go, I think it was 1.4 million, that kind of got scuttled. And so finally, Inouye's man came down. And that was where Luella got him to come down. And he saw this place and he convinced Inouye that he should take a look at this place. Well, at the same time, we had a little problem with the Nature Conservancy because they were in and out. And so I finally had to tell them, you know what? We don't want you guys working with us anymore. We're just going to go it alone. So just please butt out. Well, payback's a bitch. And so they went and tried to pay us back by scuttling our name in front of their the Phyllis Min, who was the Inouye's aide for national parks and all the recreate good stuff, the whatever. So anyway, and so she was like, well, so I guess we're not going to do business with them. And that's where Fish and Wildlife became very obstinate. So we had to overcome this hurdle. And how we overcame the hurdle was we got all the volunteers, Mary Jane Moore, Barbara Stewart, Brad Powell, got all the volunteers up in an uproar and demanded that the regional director, the Pacific regional director, come down and answer to the volunteers why they cannot promote the acquisition of Mōkōlea Point. So Al Marmelstein was the guy's name. So he came to this hostile crowd and we crucified him. And we took a cassette tape and taped everything he said. And so we asked 3 questions, major questions. Number 1, how many volunteers, we were being pitted against a Hamakua Big Island forest bird project, which was covered thousands of acres, maybe 35,000 acres. And we're little Mōkōlea Point 37 acres. So they were talking, oh, yeah, we're going to do this and we have to blah, blah, blah. That's one of our priorities. So the question was, how many volunteers you got at the Hamakua? No, well, again, I think I know the answer. I think it's 0. No comment. So then the next thing is, how come everything the Nature Conservancy gets their hands on, you guys end up buying? No comment. So I forgot what the other question was. So I ripped off a letter, No, my wife whipped off a letter of chicken scratch, trying to decipher what I said. And we sent it to his boss in Oregon. And the boss in Oregon replied a couple of weeks later, and he said, you have been now placed on number 29 on the acquisition list, and so your questions are all moot. Thank you very much. And that's how we got to that point. So eventually, we had to get down to brass tacks and negotiate the final settlement. Senator Inouye put an appropriations package together, $1.6 million. It sailed through the Senate. Congress approved it. Ronald Reagan signed it. And along with that appropriations package was the appropriations for arms to the Contras. Yeah. Yeah. So, but you know what? Arms to the Contras, BFD, nobody knows what happened to that money. We know what happened to our money. We still got them. Yeah, we still got them. So anyway, then Senator Inouye decided, okay, now it's time to come down for the transfer of deed. So he shows up to this program here. And these are the Fish and Wildlife. This is I think he's the real estate department. The other thing that we had to do, and no one really knew about this, was when you convince the federal government to buy something, you need to have a qualified appraisal. And that a qualified appraisal, they will say you can use this, and these companies. We will not accept any other appraisal. And the appraisal price was $14,500 for Moʻolelo Point. Yeah. We raised up 7,000, and then one of our fundraisers punked out because of the Nature Conservancy hullabaloo. And so I convinced my wife that we put the other $7,000 in. She goes, that's a lot of money. I said, but you know, hey, we just got to do it. Whatever, we got to get, I got to get this done. So we kicked the money in, and they did the appraisal, and the appraisal came out, guess what? $1.6 million. Okay? And they used the comparables for it was Mauna Lahi, I think, in Maka'a, that little peninsula that sits out there, and then a small lighthouse peninsula on Maui. They used those two comps to give us a price of 1.6 million. So then from there, it was clear sailing. We're number 29 on the acquisition list. We got the Fish and Wildlife behind us finally. And the funny thing is, Dan would be calling me up like once a week. What are you doing? You got to do this. You got to do this. I just got a letter from the Fish and Wildlife retired folks, and they told me that this is happening and blah, blah, blah. So you need to do this. He said, Dan, why don't you do it yourself? Oh, I can't lobby. I can't lobby. So I said, okay, fine. So finally, this thing was coming to fruition. So we had to sit down for a big meeting. And it was a big meeting. Joanne, you were there, right? Yeah. It was one of the darndest things I have ever seen. In this meeting, we met at the Christchurch Vicarage next to the parish hall. We had Dorn Schmidt and Carla Schmidt. Carla Schmidt and Dorn Schmidt walk in. with Walton Hong and 2 other mainland lawyers. So there are 5 of them. 2 for him and 1 for her. He announces that his wife is the owner of Mōkōlea Point. From the Fish and Wildlife, we have the appraiser, real estate department, Al Marmelstein, the regional Pacific Regional Director. And then we have from the county, 3 county officials, Joanne Yukimura, myself, Trust for Public Lands, Bennett Johnson. This is Al Marmelstein over here. Bennett Johnson, and Fish and Wildlife, I think it was Jerry Leineke or somebody else from Honolulu, and Dan Moriarty. There's a whole bunch of us there. And we're arguing over the final the final layout of what was to transpire. Now, Fish and Wildlife, the reason why they needed Trust for Public Land is because Trust for Public Land is not a land owner. They are a land real estate company. They pass land through them to other entities. Trust for Public Land job is to clear title. Take the check, put it in the bank, and then at some point in time, pass that money over to the developer, and then pass the deed, a clear title deed, to Fish and Wildlife. So this guy here was being very hesitant. He said, I don't even, and we had been arguing over the limbo parcel. It was a 7-acre parcel that is now part of the wildlife refuge. It's one of the best pieces of it, actually, if you ask me. It was called the limbo parcel because it was a parcel of record by the Seacliff Plantation, except they could only put tennis court, swimming pool, clubhouse. And this was going to all for the amenities of all these people at the Seacliff Plantation owners. And of course, they'd probably be paying through the nose today if they had all that. But so anyway, and they were saying, oh no, we need this and blah, blah, blah. Fish and Wildlife, we could have said, we want it. And we did. We said, we want it. We want the limbo parcel. 7 acres. Al Marmelstein comes up and says, it's not biologically significant. Well, maybe at the time it wasn't, but the Nene geese will tell you different today. Yeah. So that's the kind of forward thinking that these people had. And we were up against these people who were willing to give away stuff when we could have gotten it. He could have been our advocate. But for some reason, I guess he was paybacks of bitch. He's probably mad at me for cornering him in that meeting and sending a letter off to his boss. But anyway, so here's Carla Schmidt. She represents Mōkōlea Point. She did not say a word through the whole meeting. She had a beautiful diamond ring on her hand. It was like about that big. And I can remember going through all this bickering back and forth. And then finally, Al Marmelstein says to me, because I represented the community. I was the club, so to speak. So Al Marmelstein says, okay, Gary, can we have a meeting in private over here? I said, okay. What the heck does he want to talk about? So he goes in the back room off the living room of the vicarage. And he says, I'm afraid that Trust for Public Land is going to screw us. What? Going to screw us. They're going to hold back on giving us the land after all is said and done. I said, well, why would they do that? Because I don't know, but I need assurances. Can you give me the assurance that you guys will make sure that they pass us the land and not hold back on us for something else? I said, you got my word. If they hold back on giving the land, we'll make a holy fit and we'll scream bloody murder and make them turn over the land to you. So you don't have to worry about that. Okay, shake hands, go back out. Okay, deal accomplished. So after this had transpired. Now, all that needed to be done was a successful transfer of deed. Here's my beautiful wife over here. Look at Joy and Yukimura over here. Look at that handsome guy. I don't know him, but that's Akaka. This is Marty Rosen, who was the president of the Trust for Public Land. He was a wonderful guy. And then Senator Inouye, Joanne Yukimura. Look at you, Joanne. You haven't aged a day. Henry J. Moore, Fran Powell, Seiji Akagi. And so we had this event, and I was the MC for the event. So I'm just concentrating on making sure everything is going the right way. All the ladies did all the work to get the fancy buffet, the tent, the microphones, all this program together. And we pulled off one of the most successful transfer of deed ceremony this island has ever seen. And one where our community had the ear of Senator Inouye and Senator and Dana Kaka. Senator Matsunaga didn't come, but I guess he didn't want to steal Inouye's limelight. Maybe he was mad about the 8 million that didn't go through. But we successfully pulled off a major accomplishment. Now,
What year?
this was in 1988, April of 1988. Here's some of the Kilauea Boy Scouts. And Moriarty with Noreen Bautista. This is the really reason why I'm here today, is because all these people are gone. And so it's in a short time, it's not a long time that this has all happened. But they're just all gone. Then, after the whole thing was over, we had one more defense of the setback line that had to take place. This time, it was David Sproat, who was now the president of the Kilauea Neighborhood Association, along with Dave Moore, who had to be the interveners to go and fight the change in the setback line. Again, for the second time in less than 5 years. That was in 1988. Then, after all was said and done, and we got this wonderful wildlife refuge, some of the feedback that I got was not really the best. Yeah. Some would say, oh, he worked on that because he wanted to go camping down at Kahili. Oh, he did that because they were, what was the other reason? I forget why I had ulterior motives for doing something like this here. And then somebody wrote and said, well, now we won't even be able to go on this property because it's going to be cordoned off. And I used to go there with my dog and we'd have so much fun. I said, well, you're part of the problem if you're bringing your dog up there. But no one sees himself as being that part of the problem. So I said, you know what? For me, if what it takes to save these birds, and I told Senator Inouye early on, Fish and Wildlife might call this place biologically insignificant, yeah, and that they might think that only the cliff faces where all the birds live, and so they're not under threat, which is a bunch of baloney. These birds don't want to live on the cliff face. They want to live everywhere else as well, but we just pigeonholed them from all these years of misuse. Not to mention it was a rock quarry and they dynamited the place. And so I said to him early on, build it and they will come. And they did. They did come. So this one guy says, oh, no, we can't go. I said, I would gladly step aside and never step 1 foot on this property again if it was for the fact that we had to save the birds. I would do that. This guy didn't think so. But anyway, and it was part because we had asked the donors. He was a donor who helped pay for the appraisal. And the good news about the appraisal was We all got our money back because all the expenses were covered in the appropriations. So we got our $7,000 back. How good is that? So anyway, then I realized later on that it is not enough just to have people sit from a distance and watch the birds. It is, and this was driven home to me because for many years I volunteered as a docent who took countless groups up on National Wildlife Week and tours up into Mōkōlea Point, down into, up Nihokū, down into Mōkōlea Point and all these areas. And people were always exhilarated. And many of you have been on that very tour that I was the docent for. And I took many groups, including the World Hula Conference and many Hawaiian groups. And then part of this Hawaiian group was they would have an oli, that an oli of oli como, can we enter? That this was their protocol. And so in seeing this, I thought to myself, you know what? We need that for this, for Mōkōlea, for Nihokū. We need that. And as the years went by, doing more and more research, the name Nihokū came up more often in the Olelo Hawaii newspapers. And that in going through, I would find Nihokū, and I realized that some of the Mo'olelo had already mentioned, if you read it, that this promontory, Nihokū, had its own wind name. So in Poipoi's but anyway, Poipoi's Mo'olelo is Hiaka Ikapole o Pele. Yeah. Pele recites all the wind names because someone said, oh, you're not Kama'aina, you don't know nothing. And so she recites all the wind names for all the islands in this Mo'olelo. And in the Mo'olelo is the name Nihokū with the wind name A'opo'omuku. It means a head cut short or the sun cut short. Light, A'o is light. Po'o could be the rising sun. Muku is dwarfed or to cut short. And so it is a very auspicious name, and it had its, so that place had its own name. Then later on, I found out that that place not only had its own name, it had its own chief, Halani ki Kaupua. So began to realize that this place was a lot more significant than just the top of the hill. That Nihokū was a larger area, and that having by the virtue, and it's in the article was the 4 famous chiefs of Kauai. And some of the chiefs I knew of already, and then also Halani ki Kaupua, famous chief of Hawaii, of Kauai, for Nihokū. So it began it started to come full circle that this place had a lot of mana for Hawaiians. And so I said, you know, Mehana, I'm going to take you and your husband, Kilipaki. We're going to go on Huakai. I took him on their own personal tour all the way to the top of Nihokū, and they brought their little baby, Ana, with them. That's the 1 year. Ana is like 14 now, or no, 12, I think, 12. So this was 12 years ago. So I said, after we finished, I said, okay, Mehana, now I give you the kuleana. I want you to write one oli for this place. And I want to bring the Hawaiian voice, the Leo Hawaii, back to this land. And that you guys can be the people to malama this land. Yeah. And so she wrote this. Goes like this. Kia ia kiloa e Nihokū ku I ke kaimalinoa o makapili. Ili na kakaina I ka wahine a ka lua. Lua haa I ka malumai o ke koiki. He ini ki ka ihona I ka ili. Et cetera, and so forth. But anyway, And so she wrote it. But the thing about it is, she's created a oli that has a style that is hard to duplicate. Yeah. Hili, Ili, Iki, Iniki, Nua, Nua, Kaiva, Iva, Oni, Oni. Yeah, so in your presentation of this Oli, you know already the next line is going to start with the previous word that ended the previous line. And so that is a very clever way of doing it. And so Me'ana did that. And then she organized the Hawaiian group. And not only Hawaiians, but Hawaiians at heart and people who want to malama aina and join Kiai Nihokū. And so you got Hoku Kodi. And so they started to do cultural practice there. Hilo, watching the stars, watching the mountains, watching the weather, watching the sun, sunrise, going at equinoxes, and etc. and so forth. Then one day they made this kahili and this is some of the native seabirds. And she called this kahili, they named it, I should know it, but anyway, I'm blanking on it. And so more and more people from Kilauea School came to this place. So a lot of people. So we have a lot of organization. There's you, Krista, right there. More people participating and bringing people to the land, not just for the birds, not for just for the fish and wildlife to say, oh, you can go or you cannot go. There's sticklers sometimes, but hopefully they're going to relax, and that so it'll be much more open to allow people to go there and to malama aina and carry on the cultural practices. Now, then in 2023, guess what? We got another assault on the hill for another setback problem where the realtor cleverly did not comply to what he was supposed to do, fool the county into giving them a different setback, and then just by the time the county realized what was happening, all their files were missing, all gone. And this, oh, it was a hurricane. Well, fortunately, I had plenty of files. Mike Longstreth had plenty of files. I had given him my files. Then one day, years before, he came to my house and says, I have this file folder here. You don't give it to anybody. You keep it. A lot of it was my stuff that I had given him. Well, when I gave it to Me'ana, they said, these are all the files. We have them all. And so she was able to get the Native Hawaiian Defense Fund to step up and take on the kuleana of defending the line and defending the Hawaiian cultural practitioners. And that's how we were able to win this last battle, because they had already established their Hawaiian cultural use. Although, and the problem is today is that I made the mistake years ago of trying to answer questions when I should not have answered any of them. When the archaeologists are doing a survey and say, oh, we need to do some information, Mr. Smith. What kind of cultural uses did they have for this area, Jurassic Park? He wants to make a tourist, blah, blah, blah. What kind of cultural uses are there existing on the property? What kind of cultural uses do you remember? Well, I should have just said, there were probably cultural uses I couldn't tell you because it's long been, long past my time. Not to mention that the thing has been fenced up private land for the last 30 years. Prior to that, it was full of sugarcane. Nobody except the community could go in there. And then now all of a sudden you're asking, well, what was the cultural uses? Well, fortunately, the law not only respects the past cultural uses, but the revitalization of the cultural practices as they are practiced today. and that because this house was such a monstrosity, it would detract from the practical Hawaiian uses, cultural uses of kilo that they had been maintaining for several years. So anyway, it's through this kind of participation that then this is a Lono Ikamakahiki festival that just took place, where they had the hula dancers, they had the Ava ceremony, and it's these kind of uses that make the statement for people, listen up, this is for the public, not only for the birds, but when you go there, you have to malama aina. You have to take care of what you have, and that when you leave, all you leave behind are your footsteps. And so now it's not only for the birds, but even for this guy, this Kauai Keokeo. They nest right on the ground. They don't nest in the cliffs. People thought, oh, you know, when you go to Halimau back in the day, the birds would be all in the cliff face of Halimau crater. And you wonder, what the heck? Why would they choose such a horrible place to live with all this sulfur gas and stuff? Well, they choose those places because we forced them there. And so now they'll nest right on the ground. And so this is a very old photo, and you can see this photo here. No blasting, no cuts in Mōkōlea Point at that time. This is an aerial photo back from the 1960s. So anyway, with that, I'll leave it open to your questions. I might have glossed over a lot of things. The other thing that I was privy to and reminded of was Joanne sent me the link. After we were successful with this project, Senator Inouye thought it'd be a very good example of how a small community used the legislative process to get something that was special for them. And so he hired this woman, Heather Juni. Heather Juni's father was the long-time Sergeant at Arms of the U.S. Senate. Yeah, and so through this connection, Heather Juni made a film, and it's called How Your Government Works or something. And I'm going to give you the link, and then you can go to the Friends site, and you can look at this version of what I'm telling you here today. Of course, it's very sanitized. It was like, oh, so easy. They did this here and they did that there. We didn't do all the infighting and the backstabbing and all that stuff. He didn't say how these organizations, but he interviews a lot of people, including Joanne and myself and Dan Moriarty and a lot of people. And Mehana, bless her heart, she is like a mini adult. She's probably more eloquent at 12 years old than I was eloquent at the 38-year mark. And she's saying things like, out of a child's mouth. It's like, whoa, Mehana, wow. But I saw this in her long ago, and that's why I chose her. But I gotta say it, because Mehana comes from excellent stock. Of course, her mother, Burl, champion for Kilauea. And her husband, Gary, who gave his very last. After this whole thing finished, two things happened. Dan Moriarty came to me and he said, "Okay, come on, I'm taking you to the top of Crater Hill." I said, "What are we going up there for now, Dan?" "Well, I'll tell you when we get there." So we get up to the top of Crater Hill, and he goes like this. "I want you to get all the rest of this land," and he sweeps his hand all the way to what's called Waipake, up the valley and everything. I said, "Dan, give me a break. I just finished this whole thing at Mōkōlea Point, and you're telling me I got to get the rest of this stuff." So at the same time, Bennett Johnson and the Trust for Public Land, part of their mission is that they have to find vessels to hold the property that they make transactions for. And so what they do is they create land trusts throughout the nation. And so if they acquire a piece of land in San Francisco for a community garden, they say, okay, San Francisco Community Garden Trust, you will be now entrusted with this property. We collected our cut of this real estate transaction. Now you take care of the land and it's yours. Or, or whoever is, you're responsible. So he said, okay, we have to form the Kauai Public Land Trust. So they came down several times, and then we formed the Kauai Public Land Trust. And I was its president for like 10 years. We muddled around with this and that, few things. Spun our wheels on the Kilauea Ag Park for countless years. And then I did the best thing that I could have possibly done. I recruited Gary Blake, Dr. Gary Blake, from the 1,000 Friends of Kauai, which was kind of fizzling, and said, Gary, you gotta be the one to come to join us in the land trust. And he became the next president. Well, Gary was the guy who orchestrated a lot of the successful things that the land trust accomplished. All I did was save the vessel until some point that I could pass it over to a capable captain. And Gary Blake was that captain. And the funny thing is, Gary and I, we two Garys, right? We're not peas in the pod. He's real smart. He has a doctorate degree and hardly says a word. He just goes, He's a psychiatrist. I'm like shooting my mouth off, blah, 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 blah. And he says, And so we go down to, so he says, oh, we have this opportunity to get land, 5 acres of land at Kahili, the sand dunes. And we're going to meet with this woman. I always forget her name, but anyway, what's that? Zuibin. Yeah, Zuibin. We're going to meet with them. So we go to Waiakalua and we go into this Louise, we go into this fancy house, bamboo floor, everything. And then she greets us and says, so she's starting to talk about, and we can see the beach from there. She said, I own this, I bought all this land over here, this 17 acres. Because I don't want anybody building any houses in front of me. Yeah. And if I'm going to develop it, I'm going to develop it how I want. But this beach lot, I'm afraid that I have a little bit too much liability. Cars are coming on the beach. People are suntanning. Trucks are passing by. Surfers all parked on the beach, just like they're privileged characters. And so he says, I need to do something about it. So I said, you know what? And Gary's like this. Yeah. I said, you know what? Louise, you have an albatross around your neck. And so I think if you give us the land, we can take care of that problem for you, that you won't see another car on that beach. I said, if not, you're going to have to hire security guards, and they're going to be there 24/7, keeping these people at bay. They're not going to listen to you. So she says, and at that time, we had been Malama Aina down there, cleaning them up to the hippies and all this craziness that went down there. One troubled soul had took over Mōkōlea Point. He had hollow tile bricks, tiles, like these fancy tiles, like Italian floor tiles, all nice blue tiles all over the place, cracked all over the place, bed springs, pallet boards. And he claimed he was creating this beautiful site because he was going to marry Mariah Carey, was going to come down there and marry him. So we had to haul all this crap out. And so after, when saying that, I knew we could do something about it. And so we go down there and clean up, and we'd have these guys camping out there with a big pile of cigarette butts. And then he'd say, Gary Blake would say, please, when you leave, you could clean up everything. And blah, blah. I said, you know what? you're leaving tomorrow. And when you leave tomorrow, make sure all your shit is out of here because you don't want to see you around here. Those are just totally different. Yeah? so, so he says, we need to educate the public to keep them from not wanting to drive on the beach. Well, I'm really cynical about educating the public who doesn't want to be educated. They just want to do what they want to do. So we started off with this education program, sending out pamphlets to everybody. Joanne, you were there one day, sending out pamphlets, and one guy looks at me and he goes, throws it out the window. I'm not parking my car. I'm going down to the beach. I said, well, where are you from? He said, I live in Princeville. I've been here 10 years. I said, oh, okay, good. So he went down to the beach. I thought to myself, we gotta educate these people. So finally I said, okay, let's put a whole bunch of rocks. Put rocks, and you call a payloader guy down at $250. Sometimes the county would bring rocks down. Yeah, the kids would look at the challenge. They'd move this huge rock. You come the next day, the rock would be moved, but all the pine needles fall down. It looks like a Uni picked up the rock and moved it over there. How the heck? So finally I said to Gary, Gary, this is not going good. Let's dig a whole big hole. Bring the payloader down. Dig a big hole of it in the road. Be done with it. So we dug this huge hole. And so Gary, being the worrywart that he was, he put all this fence around it with posts and everything so nobody would fall in. I said, why you do that? He goes, somebody's going to fall in this thing. I said, look, you got cliff on both sides of this place. Somebody can, he goes, look, you'll fall on anyway if they fall down. But I humored him, and the fence lasted for as long as the salt air just eventually took it down. And she did sell her land, 5 acres, to the land trust for a reasonable price through NIH funds or whatever. What's it called? One National Weather Service or whatever they did. But anyway, they funded some of the money, and then eventually the land trust also got the 12-acre water parcel, which I wrote to the guy long ago. I don't know how these people covet such doggy stew. That's a Gary Blake terminology. A doggy stew lot, you'd call them. Such a doggy stew place with 10 acres of water, all liability if someone drowns, but they don't want to give it away. They want to sell it for big bucks. But anyway, that's where we left that at that. And then eventually Hawaii Public Land Trust became part of the Hawaii Land Trust. And this is all springboarded from what we started long ago in about 1984, which marks about 40 years of doing this to get from that point to this point. So anyway, I thank you. That's the saddest part about it now. Just kidding. Yes.
Holy, would you finish counting?
Okay. I try to do it. Go. Yeah. Not that I want. I probably can do it without, but anyway. So the first line is, Kilauea is protected by Nihokū. And that was the line I said, Miana, I want you to start the Oli with Kiaia Kilauea e Nihokū. That's all I said. So I don't know if she even remembers that part yet. But long ago, I became a student of Olelo, Hawaii. Back in 1998, I started taking Olelo, Hawaii. And that has helped me immensely in understanding Hawaiian things, understanding history, understanding the need for protocol, understanding the need for cultural revival, because you cannot revive a culture if you don't know the language. You cannot grow a culture if you don't know the language. And so today is from back compared to 1998, if you went to Olelo, Hawaii night school and you learned pehea oe, maikai au, blah, blah, blah. You know more than 90% of the people in Hawaii. So howling from the men would go, you know, I really don't get this Hawaiian. I said, well, if you know pehea oe and maikai vau, no vau, you know more than half the people in Hawaii already. So you're way ahead of them. I do? Yes, you do. So anyway, so this is ku ike kaimalino a'o makapili. That means standing firmly in the calm sea at Makapili. Makapili is the rock, right? Hili nakakaina ikawahine akalua. That means the women of the crater, the three sisters, gather closely together near the luaha'a, the humble pit in the shade of Kekoiki, which is the mountain, the highest peak in Kilauea. So you get a tingling feeling when you go down into Kahili. And more like she was saying, it's a hot, sweaty, prickly feeling walking down towards Mōkōlea Point in the places where there was no wind. And so she's basically describing she and her husband's and daughter's trip all the way from Nihokū to Mōkōlea. So and then so she says, Hili hele na maka o kapunua. That's the birds, the young birds looking around, vigilant. And then the sands are stacked up or piled up in the wind of Uhau. Uhau is the wind of Kilauea. Hahau nanalo, and then Ho'imau Kaiva. The waves are pounded onto the point of Kaiva, which is across the bay, as the Iva soars around the sunlight. Au mai nakoa e pili ike one. So the reflected lights of the Kauai bird connected to the movement. Onipa'a, steadfast is Mōkōlea as it humbly sits in the sea. Kaiaulu ke aloha e. Kaiaulu is our village, and we have great love for it. So anyway, that's how it goes. He aloha vale, he aloha no. So it goes like this. Ia Kilauea e Nihokū. Ku ike kai malinoa o makapili. Ili na kakaina I ka wahine a ka lua. Lua a I ka malumai a ke koiki. E iniki ka ihona a I ka hili. Ili ele na maka o ka punua. Lua ke one I ke alo uhau. Hahau na nalu o I mau I ka iwa. Iwa ki ka hapuni ke au. Au mai na koa e pili ke oni. Oni pa'a Mōkōlea ha'a I ke kai. Ai au ke aloha e. Ai aloha e. You kind of put me on the spot for that one, but okay. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Any advice you could give to other people trying to save places in this area on the North Shore? Do you have any advice for land preservation
I guess
efforts?
my first advice would be to gather your troops and to make a core group of citizens who are so like-minded, and then from there reach out to the larger community. And it's a daunting task, one that I believe was far easier in 1988. But it's also sad that we have to continually, as citizens, defend what we cherish, and that there's a reason. As I look around the room, we're not all young people anymore, right? And the problem is that corporations long live past our lifetimes, and they do what they like, and that once the public sentiment changes, they're there swooping in like vultures to change what we cherish most. And that is one of the problems that our county has, is that they do not hold tight to the wisdom of the old people who, even for Kilauea, for Nihokū, said they didn't want to see any houses there. They didn't say they want to see houses at a certain line or this and that. And this was at a time where condominiumization was not even a thought. This was at a time where people didn't even think people would make huge mansions, craziness. They didn't even want just a simple house on the hill, period. But that conventional, that wisdom has been put to the wayside like 2 times already. So gather the troops, find somebody, find, if it's a matter of purchase, find somebody with the money, get somebody who's a good realtor who's willing to help and negotiate something on behalf of the group and see what can be done, and also get the publicity out that.
Would you say that having the Hawaiian cultural aspect was one of the most important parts of saving Nihokū? And
Today it is.
Yeah.
It is. And that all of us here, we should participate when we can, support all things Hawaiian, and just be the best guest that you can possibly be. And the Hawaiians will take care of you if you be the best guest and appreciate your time here in Hawaii. Yeah.
50 billionaires here now.
And maybe one of those billionaires might be able to also find some connection to the billionaires. Would you like to say something?
Me? Well, I just would make a small, hi, everybody. I'm Lillian Ball, and I love Gary's talk. I'm so proud to be part of the Friends and to know what you do, what you did to save Nihokū. I was there at the planning department when you celebrated getting it. Queen's Bath property is for sale. And there is a group of people and a number of Hawaiians who are interested in it as a place for cultural practice. There's a beautiful little green stream valley, and not just the high liability beach area, which is certainly controversial and complicated, but there's a lovely place for a small conservation path and trail, and there's lots of people. Felicia Cowden, who says hello to everybody. She's doing her radio show tonight, so she couldn't be here. But Felicia Cowden thinks Gary is the greatest, Gary is the best, and that hopes that people will care and continue to pay attention to these efforts that are happening, like with Queen's Bath. And I'll be here afterwards if anybody wants to ask me about how we're approaching it. We do have meetings with the planning department, meetings with the firemen, meetings with the neighbors. We've been trying to gather some support since the auction is supposed to start on Thursday. But I just got notice that it is going to be extended, and they're going to entertain our idea about maybe preserving it, and that they will give us a little bit of time and a special deal if we can find the right angels. So anyways, thank you for all you do, and thanks to Thomas.
Well, thank you for taking the charge. Good luck on the mission.
Any other questions?
The other thing that I was going to say, thank you so much, Gary. That was just fabulous. I was in rep the whole time because I arrived at Fish and Wildlife in the August of '88 after all that work had been done. And anyway, so I had all the pleasures of being able to do biological work up there for so long and still stay
hopefully
connected.
I got across to you that it wasn't only me.
Yes, yeah.
I had a whole battery of folks. Joanne, stand up and take a bow.
Yeah.
I had Gary, I
And-
had a lot. I had a lot of help.
team works really well together.
Yeah.
That helps.
Yeah,
So what I was going to say is the link that Joanne, which you've given me before and showed me again today, is a really cool 18-minute watch. The presentation that Gary was talking about that was done. So that's a really good piece to add into when you guys do the recording. And you guys, they record this, and you can go back and look at it on the Friends group site.
Kathleen, can you put that link in the Friends group site?
Yeah, make sure Thomas has it.
Yeah.
I CC'd him on that.
But it shows the community back in '88.
And it's a good tool for kids. So what I was going to say is, especially bringing youth into that, it's simple enough to follow for any educator. And there's probably some things different now with the way things work, but it's share it when it comes out, and just go to the Friends Group's website and find the Mo'olelo recordings. And it's wonderful to watch. See all these youthful faces. And
I think we're gonna have to change the name to How Government Works.
That's
So relevant,
past
honestly.
tense.
There's a lot of relevance to it. Just the passion.
It is human beings, right?
Yeah.
It's a
Anyone
real
else?
testament to Kilauea, you know, and I remember somebody from the congressional end saying they had never seen so many letters on an issue as they saw on this Kilauea one. It was the kupuna, it was whole school, the Kilauea Elementary School, the unions, the business, you know, and yeah,
Mhm.
it was
It was
quite an amazing.
Principals from all the schools across the Kauai, Komoli, all them principals sending in. And, you know, it took one principal, John Ochoko, convinced the other guys. And so it was just this grassroots connections of each of these people had connections. So ILW, this and that. And people took the banner and went with it, which is like good for me because I didn't have to go beat the bushes for all these people. I had people beating the bushes all over the place for supporters. Yeah. But anyway, mahalo for the opportunity to do this. Hopefully that clears the air for the future and that the story won't change too much from now until doomsday. Okay.
Thank you for. Such important lessons and history to archive here and to inspire all of us to continue this work into the future now more than ever. We need community, we need our voices, we need our support. Bless you all for being here. We'll see you again next month for our next Mo'olelo. If anyone is not receiving our emails, I'll just share this around and then you'll get word about the next Mo'olelo series. Thank you for all you do and for being here. Aloha.